An entire world is ready for you to start your career teaching the path to wellness.
Mastering the science of mindfulness.
And the art of coaching.
To help clients achieve mental, emotional, and physical betterment of life.
Through movement,
nutrition,
recovery, and regeneration.
Because impacting one person impacts a family.
Impacting a family impacts a community.
And impacting a community impacts the world.
Become an NASM certified wellness coach.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Batts, and I'm here with Ken Miller, my co-host and friend and colleague, and welcome to Random Fit. How are you?
Thanks, Wendy. Good. How are you doing?
Oh, just living a dream.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Every day. Today is going to be a great day. I love this topic. I'd say that every week, but especially this week when we're talking about Title IX and women in sports. And so I was excited when this topic came up because it's definitely a topic that I think we should cover. And I think actually going through the history of how it actually came into came as a law, how it actually was brought forward and the reasons why, I think is phenomenal.
Yeah. And with Title IX, this is one of those laws, and we can take this one for granted sometimes, because when it comes to, men's versus women's, not men's versus women's, but men and women's sports, it wasn't always like it is today, where you have you have men's sports and you have women's sports. There was a time when it was just predominantly men's sports, and actually a lot of it was all men's sports in some schools, until Title IX came along and said, we need to have equal representation when it comes to both men and women. And when we talk about this today, one of the things I'm going to bring up is just my experience working in the collegiate environment and having 3 different sports that I worked with respectively that were women's sports. Now, I did work with football as one of my primary sports, but I also had three sports that I was responsible for as far as creating their programming. And if it wasn't for Title IX, I don't know if that opportunity to work with these wonderful ladies in my time as a strength conditioning coach would have ever been possible. But I do have a vested interest in women in sports, because I have a daughter who is very much athletic and is participating in multiple sports. So yeah, this is a topic that I think that we as fitness professionals or exercisers and those that have participated in athletic endeavors need to know, how things got to be where they are today.
Yes. And I mean, when you look back, and when I was actually kind of reading through it, when you think about the NCAA, I mean, that actually started in 1906, which I did not know going into that. And of course, it was really enforcing football. And of course, football brings a ton of money and a ton of fans. And, they work hard. They're doing a lot of things on the field. But you know what? When you think about in 1906, there were no women's sports. There was no women championships, and actually not a lot of women athletes out there that were even brought to the forefront at all until Title IX happened. And so, when you think about that, June 23rd, 1972, that's when Title IX was signed and came into effect. And, we keep talking about this, Ken, but tell us, what is Title IX? So if we had to give a definition, how would you describe that?
Basically, from the different things that I had to read, it's a civil rights law, right? Which prevents discrimination against women when it comes to not just sports, but education as well. So to look at it from that standpoint, to not discriminate against you as a female, again, based on gender, was one of those things, again, we take for granted today, being, 2022, as it is with this recording. We see things as, having access from both a women's and a men's side of things, but it wasn't always like that. And where Title IX typically gets its foundation, or where it gets brought up, is when it comes to athletics, but it also has an educational or academic aspect to it as well. But where we really see Title IX is when it comes to access in sports. And I just one of the things that I remember being a part of the collegiate environment, they still go through this today when it comes to budget cuts. When they look at cutting funding, or they have to save budget based on the amount of sports that a program has. If they're going to cut a sport, they're looking not just at the sports themselves, but they're also looking at, male versus female, so men's versus women's sports. So if they cut a men's sport, they have to cut a women's sport as well, or vice versa. So if they're considering one of the sports that isn't generating revenue, again, just from a financial standpoint, it does come down to money. So if a sport does not bring in money, that's one of the first things, unfortunately, that gets put onto the chopping block. So when you think about that, so if a women's sport has to go, they have to look at a comparable sized men's sport to go along with it. So it's not a fun thing to look at cutting sports, but the other side of that coin is that if a women's team has to go, so does a men's team. Yeah. But this is the thing about Title IX. It's academics and athletics, and overall, it's the knife cuts both ways when it comes to that.
The knife cuts both ways. Wow. If you guys are just joining Ken Miller and myself, Wendy Batts, on Random Fit, today we're talking about Title IX and women in sports. And I think it's important, as you said, I mean, now it is a law, but in 1972, that law was actually signed by Richard Nixon. And he's the one that, actually signed it. But one of the people that really should get the credit, I mean, she was the one that was the visionary leader, and she kind of like pioneered the education reform process, and bringing this based on her own experience was Patsy Mink, and she was out of Hawaii. And so I know she was she was pretty much the one that we have to thank for this. And, and I know too, when I was reading, it did seem, quote, unfair to the men in the very beginning when this happened, because, people that felt like they deserved that scholarship and stuff like that didn't get it, because then they had to offer similar scholarships, like you said, to women in sports. And so it wasn't like it was an easy transition, like, yay, let's bring all these women in, because, you had to think, okay, scholarship wise, if I'm going to offer so many to men, I have to, like you said, offer so many to females. And I know that didn't go over quite so well in the very beginning, but now it's just the way it is. And, that I think it's a blessing, because 1970, when we look at the time, 1972 wasn't that long ago. And so we, even though for some it seems like it was forever ago, to myself it doesn't. However, it's actually good to see that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and again, going back to 1970, that's 50 years ago now, and
yes.
To think that within our lifetime we're still gaining equal foothold when it comes to that. And you brought up a really good point, Wendy, because when you're talking about scholarships, these are opportunities that student athletes have to get further their education through their endeavors with athletics. And if you had a situation before 1972, before this came into became into law, then it was pretty much just men gaining access to further education, subsidized by funding. And that's the part of it, is the fact that because this is a law and we have to look at equal opportunity, anything that has government funding has to have this equal opportunity for both men and women. So now that you have Title IX in effect, now that you have opportunity for both men and women to further their education. And we all know what furthering your education from an academic standpoint can do. So if you have those opportunities available to you through scholarship, then that's going to get more equal footing for females when it comes to furthering their education. And one of the things that again, as a strength and conditioning coach, you have to realize that when it comes to furthering your education, if you're a good enough athlete within a sport and you are attending college, it's just one less thing you have to worry about when it comes to financially supporting yourself through school. So a scholarship of any kind, especially an athletic scholarship, if that helps subsidize your education, then you're going to have that many more, not just female sports, females in athletics, but also you're going to have that many more females graduating from academic programs as well. So that's the bigger side I see to this aspect of the law.
Well, when you look at the numbers too, I mean, just looking at, where we were. So like in 1972, women in sports, there was 295,000 females that were participating in different sports. And now we've grown that up to over 2.6 million. And so when you're thinking about it, when in college, it went from 30,000 to over 150,000. And so just so you guys know, like, look at that number, and a big part of what Title IX is credited with isn't just about giving, quote, the equal opportunity, if you will, but it's more of decreasing the dropout rate from girls in high school and increasing the number of women that are going to pursue a higher education and complete their college degree for exactly what you were saying. And so I think, when you think about how many women are graduating, if you get a scholarship to support yourself in order to do that and play a sport that you love and you're good at, it definitely is a win-win.
Yeah. And, to kind of add on to that, again, looking at sports, looking at academics, this also addressed access to facilities and supplies. And again, just kind of, this is a little bit of biased information when it comes to athletics. But, I just remember with my time at Cal, this is before they had built out their high performance center, which just tops in the nation when it comes to the equipment, but also the facilities themselves, to where you had, back in the day when I first got there in, mid 2006, 2010, you had football, which is the big sport, obviously, because, it does garner a lot of the monies that comes into athletics, but you had different sports that had to go to another building, right? And you had, the coaches, especially with some of the female sports, they had to go someplace else. Again, spacing was an issue, and access to offices within the central area when it came to Memorial Stadium wasn't there. But then once the high performance center was built out, then you had, everybody was centralized. So offices for all the coaches for both men and women's sports, but also the locker rooms. I'll tell you what, Wendy, one of the things that was missing, and this is, again, I'm not talking about this university specifically, as it was in other universities as well, as I learned later on, but you had athletes of these other sports. Again, when you talk about funding, especially through the public school system, a lot of times the budget isn't there. Living in California, a lot of it isn't there, and these universities are, struggling for funding. But you had athletes, both men and women, in some of these smaller sports that had to change clothes in their cars. Mm-hmm. Right? They had to park, and they had to change because they didn't have locker rooms, right? So therefore, if they don't have locker rooms, they don't have showers. So you had situations where the funding just wasn't there, especially, it's witnessed by a lot of female athletes. Like, you had to change in your car, you had to go back to your apartment or the dorms to take showers. Now that, things were on more equal footing, because, Memorial Stadium, or Cal, has been around way longer than 1972. When they built things out, then, things were on a more even playing ground, figuratively and literally, when it came to the facilities that they had access to. So that was one of the good things that does come from it, is that, I don't have to, as a female athlete, you don't have to,
change in the car
versus
go to school stinky.
Another athlete that just, they got their locker room, they have the showers, and they have everything available to them. So it's one of the benefits that you saw witness once things were able to develop.
Yeah. And if you guys are just joining us on Random Fit, myself, Wendy Batts, we're here with Ken Miller. We're talking about Title IX and women in sports. And Ken, I think you bring up some really important topics and what we've seen. Like you said, there's more facilities, there's equal opportunity. However, one thing that I did go over and over again. We keep talking about equality, but there's differences between equity and equality. And I think we really want to think more of the equity side, because it's still not equal. I mean, we may offer the same, like scholarship numbers, like you have to provide this many numbers and make it equal to that many number when you're giving out scholarships, and it has to be an equal balance, like you said, especially if it's government funding. However, when you want to think about that too, you've got to think, like you said, budget. And so there may be more money put into different facilities that bring in more, because that's where the money was, allotted. Like, okay, it's going to go into this different, this specific facility. Because if you go into, especially some of these colleges, and look at their football facilities, it is like, you walk in and it's like, whoa, you get these crazy lighting and these recovery rooms and everything all to itself, like where it's like this one place you would want to live your whole life because of all the amenities that one particular facility had for football. But then if you go and do something else that's maybe female related, there's nothing that's equal that, like there's not we're bringing women football facilities in now, but it's just different. And so I started looking into some of this differences of like money, and even in professional sports, you look at something, and I bring this to the forefront because I actually train and work with some LPGA, athletes. And then I also work with PGA athletes. And so it's interesting, even when you look at the championship purse, because there are, in men's sports, there's usually a bigger audience. There's more money that's brought in with ticket sales. There's more sponsorship on, television. And so there's usually more money poured into the men's sports versus the women's. However, there still is money given. So if you look at like just the CME, which is like the Tour Group Championship for women, they've increased their purse. If the winner of that one particular golf tournament wins, she wins $1.5 million, which is the largest prize ever in women's golf history. And the second place woman won $480,000. Sounds like a lot of money. But then if you look on the men's side, especially because of the sponsorships and because of television and all that stuff, you've got, $75 million now in comparison to 60 million that is for the, like available. So the winner of that one tournament, if you're a male, they make $18 million. And so they're still playing 18 holes. They're still playing sometimes even the same course, but there is a substantial and significant difference in comparison of what the earnings are because of the crowds and the sponsorships.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, and you bring up golf, you see this, like you mentioned, basketball is the same way, tennis is the same way, and soccer, definitely women's soccer or football is definitely the same way. But, I think when it comes to that aspect, again, revenue generation versus funding, and that's where, equity, equality, as you're bringing up, Wendy, those are two different things. So when it comes to Title IX, again, this is when it comes to federal funding, right, versus revenue generating sports, because I've also seen where, women's sport, especially with some gymnastics programs, that they have their own building for gym practice. They have their own building for actual gymnastics meets, right? Where they're drawing, some of these gymnastics programs draw more people than, in paid ticket sales than some football programs bring with their programs. So, and that's where you'll see, depending on the program that is revenue generating, they'll have their own athletic trainers, they'll have multiple strength coaches, and they'll have, of course, the gear and all that, all the swag that comes with their sport and teams, some of that stuff reflects as well. So you do bring up a really good point as far as the difference between equity and equality. But again, money talks, unfortunately, when it comes to how some of these teams are subsidized. But again, when it comes to government involvement, that's one of the bigger differences. But if your gymnastics team is drawing 50,000 people a meet, then yeah, you're going to be in a better position than that, where you're pretty much, you're struggling to fill in the arena to meet your viewership.
Yeah. And when you look at Title IX in general, and those of you guys that are just joining us, that's what Camilla and I are talking about on Random Fit is basically Title IX and women in sports. But some of the examples too of the types of, because we were saying that it's not just, equal opportunity, but it's also the types of discrimination that are covered under this. You've got sexual harassment and the failure to provide equal athletic opportunities. So self-based discrimination in schools, science, technology, engineering, math, these courses and programs, and especially also women that are pregnant. And so, I think all of that, we just kind of focus more of women in sports, but the Title IX really is kind of all inclusive for women to give us an equal opportunity to do different things that men can do. And it just be, we have the kind of the backing to support, some of the stuff that we're doing. I think that's super important.
Yeah, and it's huge. One of the things I don't think we talk about enough, because a lot of this is reflected in like the collegiate environment, right?
Mhm.
Because that's when we're talking about scholarships. But when you think about like the trickling down, if someone wants to go to college, if a female wants to go to college and she figures out that, okay, well, one of the ways I can get there academically, or I can get there athletically. Well, what does that do to your motivation to do well in sports in high school? And and of course meeting requirements for academics, but having a daughter myself, that is one of those things where again, I'm not one of those dads that I'm trying to get my daughter a scholarship. You get her to pay for college through sports and athletics, but if it is something that's going to help her become a more well-rounded student by participating in sport, and if it is an opportunity in the future to where she can play sports, whether it's a scholarship or not, but if that's something that she can play recreationally because she's now doing it in elementary school, she can do that through junior high and high school and gain opportunities all the way down to where she is in her age group and her grade. Then I think I think that kind of trickles down to where it's going to promote fitness and wellness and activity, and not just my daughter, but any girl her age that wants to participate in sport and have access to sport as they go through the school system. And maybe if it's something that she wants to and pursue in college, then that opportunity is there. And that's one of the things that I'm grateful for when it comes to Title IX, what it's been able to do, not just again from an athletic standpoint, but the access to, as we're seeing here, access to facilities, equipment, tutoring, things like that helps promote the educational side, and not just the athletic side. So I think that's where it really, really can affect a female in the developmental process when it comes to school and athletics.
Well, we talked about just how important sports can be in the developmental process. And so, to your point, when you're thinking about social skills and coordination and strength and conditioning and just overall health, I mean, we see so many benefits in sports. And so, to your point, if we can take them to a higher level, they're skilled and they want to do it, then it gives them the motivation and the drive. And if they want to do it in a collegiate level, then to your point, you have to have good academics. You have to be able to be all inclusive in order to get that scholarship. And teaching for a university, I mean, we do athletic checks. So we have the directors contact us throughout the semester to get the students' grades that are participating on scholarship at their university to make sure that they're meeting the requirements. And if not, they will, like to your point, they will bring in help to help tutor them and to help make sure that they're hitting the grades. So therefore they can hit the court or the field or whatever, and stay within the regulations in order to do that. And so, there are so many positives, and it is, like I said, I mean, being a female myself and kind of going through that process, it's awesome to know that it's there. I think it's only going to continue to get more competitive, and because they're still, when you think about scholarships, there's not a lot of scholarships per school. And so, it is very cutthroat. If you have to be really good in order to get a scholarship in all
Right.
sports.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think we all forget is that when it comes to women in sports, you have the professional routes that you can go after college, but I think just to even think about, like, again, the percentage of even male athletes that make it to the pro level, what is it? I mean, something like 0.2% from being a high school freshman to the professional. It's not a very big percentage of people that get there. So when you think about opportunities for females to go on to that onto that level, whether a pro golfer, soccer player, or tennis, but we forget about those that decide, okay, well, college is it. I just I want to earn my degree. Athletics is the car that I'm gonna have to ride in to get that college degree without going into debt when it comes to graduating. But a lot of these student athletes do become professionals in academics and in engineering, and because they've had opportunities that were once, as you mentioned earlier, that were once only available to men when it came to subsidizing their college education. So I think even to get through the collegiate levels is really, it's a opportunity for access, and all we ever want really is to have access and opportunity, and then again, it's up to you to pursue it.
Exactly. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Well, Ken, like I said, I could probably talk about Title IX all day, and women in sports specifically, because there are so many people that were on the forefront. You think of Jean Kidd. She was actually, they talked about her at the Olympics, just a few weeks ago, and just her impact in tennis and being on the forefront of Title IX, and being such a big part of discrimination and trying to make us recognize the importance of all this. It was actually really cool to see her there, and just learning a little bit more of how she was a part of all this stuff too. But June 23rd, 1972, it was definitely a date that changed women's history, especially women in sports. And so, yeah.
No, I agree. This is one of those things that a lot of, again, being where we are 50 years later after the passing of that law, a lot of guys and girls, they don't understand. They don't understand the history of how this came to be and the opportunities that it's allowed. So I think this was a really good topic for us to cover, because there's a lot of people were able to achieve their educational and athletic goals because of this. So I think it was this was a good talk, Wendy. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
All right. So hey, thanks for joining us today on this episode of Random Fit, and on this topic of Title IX. So if you like what you heard, like, follow, subscribe, and comment, and we'll be sure to talk about things that you guys want to listen to when it comes to Random Fit. So until next time, everybody, take care and be well.